Okay, folks, so open up the file that's attached in your weekly video lesson. I'm also going to attach a Google Drive link in the YouTube video description so that you can follow along. All right, so let's animate. So from the previous lesson, part one, we talk about how the transform tool works and the select tool, right? Select tool, very important that you know how this works so that you'll know how to do, your standard rectangular selection. I intentionally made everything else unselectable so that we don't accidentally grab anything other than the cube. Okay. We are using the latest version of Blender as of this moment, 4.0.2, but this is basically uh, would work with any version of Blender, even version 1 of Blender, okay, or version 10 of Blender by now, okay? I mean, in the future. All right, so let's talk about animation. All right, so principles of animation is what we're going to be talking about here because those are the foundational things that you need to be aware of, right? So, like solid drawing, very important, right? Solid drawing, in a nutshell, when it comes to at least 3D animation, you basically animate with the volume of the object in mind, right? So let's say if I want to scale this from the z-axis, okay, and we want to incorporate solid drawing, that's not going to work, right? Because we took out the top part right here, so it should displace right there and over here. And then again, I'm just eyeballing it, right? So that would be kind of correct right there, okay? But it's scaling in the middle, but that's another topic, okay? So that's a solid drawing right there. So click and do, okay? And then we can also do timing, okay? And spacing and slow in, slow out. So there's a lot of the basic ones that will be covered, right? So let's do it one at a time. Let's do our timing first and how Blender's default behavior is, right? So by default, and I'm talking about all 3D programs here, okay? If you go to their, where's my system right there? Animation. There we go. Okay, so I went to edit preferences, the animation tab, and your default interpolation. This is the default behavior of objects when you animate them left and right if you are using Blender as your junior animator. Okay, so basically the behavior is Bezier, and Bezier gives you a slow in, slow out. So when we move this just from point A to point B, we will get a slow animation effect. Okay, so that's the default behavior, and we can change that so that you can have a different type of animation, and you can set your interpolation to whatever it is that you want. Okay. All right. Just making sure the cats are not going to be in the recording. Okay. Excuse me. All right. So let's start with the first one. So move tool, right? Transform tool. So when you're animating, it's kind of like a 4-step process. Okay. First, you want to select the object you want to animate. That's makes sense, right? Make sure you're doing it in object mode. We're not animating in edit mode. You need to be in object mode. Okay. Next is position the time where you want to do your animation. So we, by default, we have 250 frames because Blender's origin is European. So 25 frames per second PAL. So their 10 seconds is 250. For us, it's 24. That's our classic cinema frame rate. So that for us, it'll be 240, but it doesn't matter, right? So that's just kind of like the default. Let's kind of simplify this by changing our viewing here to, let's say, 50 frames, okay? And then I'm going to middle click drag this and scroll my mouse so that I will zoom in just on 1 to 50 so I can concentrate just on those frames. Kind of like how you animate, you would have a section where you would have all this, you're locked in just on that scene or in that shot. All right. Okay. So next, we want to position our time. Okay. And then position the object, and then keyframe. Okay, so in Blender, it's really easy to keyframe. I'm going to click undo here real quick. When you press I, okay, you can select whether you want to do a location animation, which is what we're doing, rotation or scale, or you can do a combination of both, or just tag everything. You want to keyframe everything, kind of like this one, right? I'm going to click undo on this one just as samples. If I hit location right here, you can see this kind of brownish, yellowish color indicating that there's a keyframe on that. You can also see it here in the timeline. There's a key that was generated. Okay, so let me click undo. If I press I and then did rotation, everything, there it is. Okay, so you key everything so that later on when you're, let's say, watching this on the dope sheet, okay, and then you're looking at it as a summary and whatnot, then you'll see that each one would have those keys, and you can change their values for each one of them. So this is when it gets a little bit complex later on, especially with a function curve. But we're going to try and simplify it. So we're not going to be doing that, which I always do when I auto keyframe my forward kinematics animation. But for now, we're going to simplify it. All right. So even this one right here, we're going to take it back to the timeline. Okay. And simplify it like so. Click undo so that we don't have any keys. Okay. Just wanted to kind of show you that. All right. So here we can be specific with our animation, right? So let's animate this cube moving from left to right in about, let's say, 20 frames. Okay. Well, let's say 24 because our default is 24 frames per second. That's what we're sticking, right? So we want it to start right here. So again, the 4 steps of animation, right? So first, select the object you want to animate. Done. Next, position your time. Okay. We want it on frame 1. That's where we want it to start. Okay. Where in frame 1 do you want to start your cube? So we're going to go X right here, slide it right there, kind of closer to the edge of the floor. Okay. Right here, it's giving us a minus 5 value and some loose chain. So let's just be precise on this one. I'll just go -5, enter. Okay. So that's step 3. So step 1, select the object, position the time. Third is position the object. And then the last one is key your animation. So we know if I press I right here and then location, I get a key. Okay. That's my pose right there. But I also got keys I got static keys on Y and Z, which we don't need them, right? They just add to the confusion right here for now. So we're going to do something very precise. Okay, so I'm going to click undo. So instead of just pressing I, okay, instead of just pressing I and keyframing all the location, we're just going to right click X and then insert single keyframe. That way, we only keyframe this along the X and none of the other transform tools and axes got involved. Okay. Next is we want to move this to the right in 20 frames, right? So 4 steps again. First step is select the object in object mode that you want to move. Done. It's still selected. Next one is move the time. So let's go to frame 20. Okay. Third one is position the object. All right. So we want it on the other side, which is +5. Okay. Fourth step, keyframe. Okay. So I'm going to right click here, insert single keyframe, and then when we preview this, spacebar is the keyboard shortcut. There it is. Okay, and it's on loop. As soon as it hits 50, it goes back to that. So from 120, I can stop that playback and scrub it. All right, so that's all there is to it. So there's a little slight bit of behavior where it went from kind of slow start and then slow end, but can't really see it right there because the animation is way too fast, right? So now, while we're in the timeline right here, you see that key right there? So if I select that, it turns to that orange. That means it's selected. move tool keyboard shortcut is G. If I press G, I can retime this. So let's say 20 is too fast. All right. So we want that. We want it to go to the end at 40. So the other keyframe, I'm going to move it to 40. So you can see now, this thing is a lot slower. There we go. So we just retimed it. We can also make it not start on frame 1. We can make it like, okay, start on frame 10, but end at, let's say, 50. And when we start right here, there's a hold right here. No activity from 1 to 10. And then it goes. All right. So that is animation basics keyframing. Okay. And of course, we can do all sorts of stuff to this. We can now animate the rotation. So let's say we want this thing rotating. Okay. Let's say we want it to start rotating, spinning, starting on 20, and then stop spinning on 50. So let's go select the object that we want to animate, step 1. Step 2 is position the time. So around frame 20, we want it to rotate. Let's click on the rotate tool. So we want it to spin, so that will be the z-axis, right? So at the beginning, there's no rotation yet, but we do want to key the one that matters, which is z-axis right here. So we want to say, give it a 0-degree rotation because we want it to start on that keyframe. So insert single keyframe. And of course, you're not going to see any rotation here because on frame 20, okay, that's all. Let's open this up so you see it. There's Z rotation, okay? And ignore all that stuff on top. That's just all the other associated ones. So that's why summary is a good way to start. So you're not bombarded with all sorts of data, okay? So from 20, so step 1, select the object. Step 2, okay, we go to 50, okay? We go to frame 50, and what do we do at frame 50? We want to rotate it, okay? So we want to rotate it. So it'll have a rotation from 20. So what is the degree where we want to rotate this? So let's say we want it to go 360. Okay. So now from 20 to 50, you can see there's no rotation in 10. It starts on 20 and it did a rotation. Okay. So again, basic keyframing. All right. The next one is we want to scale it. Okay. So we want to shrink this proportionally from, let's say 30 to 50. So we go to select the object we want to animate. It's done. Step 2, position the time. I go to frame 30 right here. Okay. And then step 3, we want to transform the object by either moving, rotating, or scale. But this time it's scale. So I'm going to go to my scale tool. I'm going to click on this white circle for our uniform scaling. Okay. And we're going to scale it XYZ. Okay. So I'll just maybe just the X so that we keep the height. Okay. So just on the X. So right here, 30 is no scaling. This is the beginning of the scale though. So even though it's not scaling, you got to keyframe it. And this is where a lot of confusion starts, is that just because it has no value, and 1 is considered a value, of course, because if it's 0, it won't exist, right? So watch the previous video for that explanation. So we want X right here. So insert single keyframe, no scaling yet. But when we reach 50, we want to scale it, let's say 2.2 scaling right there. Right click and insert single keyframe. So what's going to happen is there will be scaling from 30 to 50. It's not just going to jump to 50 right here because, again, remember we have that Bezier interpolation. There is in-betweening that's happening with a slow in and slow out. So if we play this, and it scales. All right. So that is basics of keyframing in Blender. Okay. So you can either use I keyboard shortcut, or you can activate the sidebar, which is N. Go to the items tab, and then you can see, as long as this one is selected, you will see its value right here. And you can animate directly here. There's also the auto keyframing right here. Stay away from this from this one for now, what we're learning. And yeah, and that's how you keyframe in Blender. Okay, and see you on the next video.